Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? I am so pleased to be here. This is Victoria Lorient-Fabish, registered psychotherapist, holistic psychotherapist, speaker, and I'm here with my incomparable guest, my wonderful guest, Roxanne Bartel, who is a performance coach, and she's a leadership coach as well, and she consults in many wonderful corporations. And she also does work outside of the corporate culture, and I just want to say welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here, Victoria.
Thank you for being here with me on my live Facebook, and it's a gorgeous day in Toronto where we have sun again. I always treasure days that there's sun because sun is, it can be very energizing. But today we're talking leadership, and not just leadership. I'm going to wait for a few people to come on, but it's okay if they don't. We are going to proliferate this video widely. Leadership, not just in terms of when you're a leader in a company or a corporation or even an organization, but what does it mean to be a resilient, healthy leader in your own life, which to me is how the planet, which I'm interested in, will benefit.
Yes.
The planet needs good leaders. And thank goodness for people like Roxanne, who's really bringing healthy leadership onto our planet. So the first order of business would be to ask you a little bit about, what have you heard? And in terms of like when you work with leaders, what's the biggest complaint, or not even complaint, but commentary that you hear from people that bring you on and going, hey, I need some help?
Well, it's interesting because I think what you're talking about is people who are in positions of leadership, and and so interestingly, a lot of people might be curious to hear this, is that they feel alone.
That they feel alone.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
That they feel alone.
Not what I thought was going to come out of your mouth. Yeah,
I realize that, and as soon as I heard the question, I thought, oh, this may shock some people, but people in leadership often feel like they have to make and this gets them into trouble, and it makes a lot of people around them unhappy because they feel like they have to make big decisions, that they're going to have people unhappy with them, and that they have to stand alone.
Hi, Leonardo. I think you met Leonardo in Valencia. Leonardo. Isn't it wonderful? The international world can see us. Yes. Yeah. Hello, Valencia.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Hi, Carolyn. Nice. Welcome, everyone who's coming on. And just make your presence known, because we want to hear from you. We want maybe some questions about leadership. But I think that's really interesting that leaders are lonely.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, they do. They feel very much alone, and some of the... for lack of a better word right now, I'm going to say some of the defensive and strong misuse of power comes out of that feeling of being alone from what I've observed. Like, I remember one client saying to me he couldn't work with millennials. And he realized that because he kept, no names.
No, exactly.
He kept saying to me, I keep firing them.
Oh.
And once we dug under that, we realized, some of the things he didn't understand and how they weren't understanding his messages. And once
they weren't communicating,
realized that and connected with them, as opposed to that top-down piece, it changed everything. And it's changed everything in his practice.
How interesting. So once he started to meet them where they're at, it sounds like.
Well, and also,
is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and also to realize that even little things he would say that he thought meant one thing, because of it coming from his perspective, was meaning something entirely different to these people who wanted his approval. Right? And so they were doing literally what he said, not the
thinking in bigger ways. Yeah. That is, and so literally these generational differences in leadership, it can be the communication death.
Yes, it can.
Where they're not really meeting each other.
Especially when leaders, as I said, feel alone and feel like they're responsible for everything. And so it has them, we often refer to them as leaders who are micromanaging us, when in fact what they're trying to do is bring out the best in everyone, and they just haven't figured out the best way to do it with individuals.
Right. And it sounds to me like yes, what Carolyn is saying, we don't hear the same thing. Yep. We don't hear the same thing. One person's saying one thing.
That's right.
They think that they're saying something, but they don't.
Right.
So it's important to find a common ground in communication, regardless of the generations.
Yes. way back at one point in my career when I was doing a lot of leadership development and building programs for succession planning, one of the things I heard myself say to new and upcoming leaders is the message received. Not what you intended.
Not what you intended, yeah.
It's what's received. And so you need to pay attention and read what's going on. And when they don't act on what you think you said, get curious. Get curious about why that is. Because with this leader that I was coaching, what he realized is that he was saying one thing and it was being interpreted another. And once these millennials would acknowledge that to him, he had big ahas. And he shifted the way he set his expectations.
So interestingly, we this conversation said, okay, we're not just going to talk about people who are in positions of leadership. We also want to talk about what it means to be a leader in your own life, in your own being. And we talked about, optimism as a key ingredient. Yeah. But I want you to sort of elaborate on that.
Yeah. I want to first say about people being leaders in their own life. People who have, I call it positional power. Those are people who have been given positions of leadership. Mm-hmm. However, they too need to be thinking about their personal power. Because it's when they haven't become attuned to that they can't lead with authenticity and with compassion. Now, every single human being has personal power. And when we start to recognize that and work with that and own it, that's when we're able to be a leader in our own life, and we're able to influence what happens to us and the impact it has on others.
I mean, I'm so interested in this. I mean, I've had different performance coaches or executive. Like, I love your perspective because I think you're very humanistic. I mean, you work in major corporations, but I feel that your approach is very human, and you work with, they're just human beings. And I think that that no matter what, there's corporate relationships, but they're people. Yeah. They're human beings.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that I actually left the corporate world, because I was in and out of the corporate world. I haven't just been in the corporate world. And so one of the reasons that I left was that I wanted to look at it with a bit of distance. And in doing that, what I did was I thought to myself, okay, what do I care about? What matters most to me when I look at the organization? It's the relationships. It's the people. And I care deeply. I love the corporate world. I know a lot of people run away from it.
That's very interesting and cool.
I love it because there are a lot of people stuck there. Right. And I think we can make it better. And if we don't love it, we will not look to make it better. And so when I think about some of I had some horrible experiences, but I had some amazing experiences, met some amazing people. And I know we can make it better. I think we can make it healthier and happier. And
that's what I'm interested in, sort of healthy. We talk about, we work out together, Roxanne and I in our condo. And what we talk about is this notion of healthy corporate culture and how to lower the toxicity level, because there is a lot of, because corporations, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert on this, they really are massively about bottom line. So some of that healthiness goes out the window for the bottom line. And as I said, I currently have a number of people in my psychotherapy practice currently on stress leave because they can't keep up with the demand of the bottom line. And the culture's toxic.
Cultures can be toxic.
Can be.
But the thing about the bottom line is we all need to think about the results that we produce, even in our families and in our lives. So organizations are focused and they keep score. That's a bit maybe they keep score by their contribution margins and by their
they keep score right.
and even their stock price. However, we recognize that that's the point of keeping score. It's all the work you do before to make the points that matter, and it goes all the way back to that vision and value and mission that you set. The culture that's generated, the engagement. One of the things we know from a lot of the Gallup research and Marcus Buckingham's work, we learn about how the environment that we create, the engagement that happens there, is the starting place.
Who's the work from?
Marcus Buckingham. Okay. He wrote the book I mean, this has been out for 30 years, and still organizations are struggling to move the needle on it. But what came out of that is that engagement is really low in workplaces.
Engagement in terms of each other.
Yeah, involvement. Well, engagement, the way he would talk about
Okay.
it, and the way it's talked about in the corporate world, is a little broader than that. It's more about how involved am I? How committed am I? As opposed to, am I sabotaging the workplace unintentionally?
Yeah.
But yeah, and
invested, skin in the game,
exactly,
all of that
exactly,
stuff. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly.
And Carolyn says stress leave is huge. I work with Manulife Insurance, and that's a big problem in the corporate world. I know, and I mean, as a psychotherapist, they come by my office, and we are working with that. It's massive.
And
anxiety, depression, too much stress, too much on their plate. Also, but I have to say, and see what you think about this, I have to say a lot of the time, though, I find that the people who end up on stress leave, and this is not in any way a judgment, it's just an observation, have in them their own personal culture, in their own self culture, the ability, the difficulty with saying no because they learned that from family, difficulty, they don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want to be seen as, so they end up taking on more than they can actually handle, so they don't reach out for help. Yeah. What do you think about that?
I think that there's a lot of truth in that, and that's why I talk about the personal power. You know, the need to be, okay, so leaders need to take responsibility for how they create the culture around them, because they have that positional power.
So leaders, right. But,
however, individuals can do a lot to create a better life for themselves and to engage differently in the workplace, and they'll be amazed to see how their contribution is valued when they go in there with an understanding of their personal power and ability to live it every day, to bring it every day. And so, you know, there are 3 questions. Do you mind if I go to the questions?
Please do.
There's 3 questions that the listener, when you think about your own ability to be the leader in your life, and specifically, I have a lot of passion right now to talk about resilience, because I think leaders need
Say it again, resilience.
Resilience.
Yes.
Leaders need to be more resilient to deal with the current workplace environment and to lead from an effective, healthy place. And individuals need to look at resilience. And
you also use the word grit.
Oh, yes.
I love that
to
word.
Me, I love Angela Duckworth's research, and I'll probably mention her again.
Okay.
But the 3 questions that I would encourage you to ask yourself is, number 1, what are the stories you're telling yourself? Because when I work with leaders, I often ask them, what are the stories they're telling themselves and others? Because, and that's how one client of mine that I told you found himself firing millennials. That was the question that sparked that conversation, is what's the story you're telling yourself? Because he was unhappy that he wasn't able to keep his team intact.
Right. And
so we uncovered that. So I think we need to ask ourselves that. The second thing is, how are we explaining the difficulties we hit? What's the explanatory style that we have adopted when we look at the failure or disappointments that we encounter? Because resilience comes out of that. And the third thing is, how are you practicing self-compassion, which is something you were already alluding to.
Totally. Self-compassion. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I just love that. And so everyone take note of that. You'll hear this video again and listen to that as you are, because that applies not only to leadership in positions, but leadership with your own life, how you're leading your own life. Yes. You know, the story you tell yourself, self-compassion, and also, I think you've talked about optimism. You know,
it's all about, it's the key to it all.
Staying positive, staying enthused, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the research tells us that the optimists are the closest to being realists. It's the pessimists that, and so we
even though our brain is like Velcro to negativity and Teflon to positivity, but we have to know, and that science does really support that when you can cultivate optimism in you, when you can cultivate that optimistic viewpoint on life, that there is a powerful engagement with life that's more positive, that's more smooth, that's better relationally. Yeah. So optimism is crucial.
Did you just use the word cultivate?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I do
love
workshops.
That word.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I do workshops, and one in particular that I'm going to expand more publicly in the coming months is one on resilience. I call it resilience it takes grit, because we need to have grit in our lives. But that isn't something you just can give people the theories on.
No.
You need to practice it. And so one of the things that I do in my workshop is we look at all kinds of different theories, and I love having fun with stories in that. And then what we do is we actually have to build a plan, because you need to have
It's all about building a plan, a roadmap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Angela Duckworth in her work has broken down grit as being about passion and about perseverance. And those words didn't work for me when I started looking, because we all need to find the way that works for us within the learning. And so I started landing on, instead of passion, purpose. Because when I left the corporate world, my purpose was about how to make any organization I touched moving forward healthier and happier.
Wow.
And so I started to
And
find
purpose
purpose
is
in
the
it.
key.
Oh, for me it was.
Well, Dr. Viktor Frankl talks in Man's Search for
love
Meaning.
his stuff.
He talks about purpose as the key ingredient to moving forward in difficult situations. So I think you're on track.
And still, it's a little vague. So I had to get more specific.
What is purpose?
What is my purpose? And I try and revisit that regularly. And then on her perseverance, what I realized for me that was a better word for me, and it's still a P, is practice.